Oh, good afternoon, everyone, and good day wherever you may be in the world. I heard that we have friends from New Zealand joining us, and so we just want to say a big warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here, and especially to our two guests, Sharon Roggio and Ed Oxford. We want to really welcome them. Can you give them a warm welcome? So, as many of you know, Rocky is the director of 1946. She has spent so much of her life and her energy into this, right? And some of you, I hope many of you have watched the movie, at least yesterday, and we are really looking forward to hearing a little bit more from her, maybe some secret behind-the-scenes information that most people may not know. And at Oxford, of course, is one of the researchers. I mean, he is amazing, right? If you've seen the movie, he is amazing. The massive amount of research that he has done to make this possible, and so you saw his amazing face on the movie. Now you get to see him in person. And we're going to hear from both of them, right? And so what we're going to do is that I'm going to just let Rocky introduce a little bit about the movie and, what your thoughts were behind it, what your hopes were behind it, and then we'll take it from there, all right?
Well, hello, and thank you for inviting us back again. We're so honored to be here in Singapore and be able to share the movie all over the world, but was our Asia premiere yesterday, and we're working on hitting more Asian countries, so we're really excited. And we have played in New Zealand at churches and things like that. So anybody that is listening, thank you, New Zealand. Thank you, everyone all over the world. You can rent the movie online, and we have on the QR codes on our linked tree on our social media, you can find information on how to share the film with your community. We encourage watch parties, whether it's at your home, in your living room, or in an environment like this. So anyway, I just wanted to start with that. But yeah, so my name is Sharon Roggio. I'm the director-producer of 1946, the mistranslation that shifted culture. I am in the film industry, and I accidentally stumbled on this journey, and now I'm a social advocate for LGBTQ community in the church. But my journey is unique to me, but I always like to say it isn't unique. When you grew up in the church as an LGBTQ Christian, you feel all the feelings that we see in the film. And so I had been working to try to affirm my reality with my non-affirming parents my entire life. And that led me down this journey, and then and I'd been so far removed from church. I left church when I was 18, and I was never going back. I ended up going back because of a girl. Isn't that the way, right? So to honor the relationship, I said, sure, let's go to church. The girl and I didn't last, but the church thing is here, so yeah. But so in that experience, being able to be an adult and reading the Bible again as an adult and being in those spaces and questioning has led me to learn of Ed and his fantastic research that he did with Kathy and this amazing story that we put together from our own individual experiences that a lot of people in this room and online probably share. And so I guess this is my calling, and we can learn a little bit more about that
Absolutely.
next year.
This is your ministry, and you are saving lives.
Thank you.
That's what we concluded yesterday, for sure. Yeah, thanks, Rocky. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to move to Ed and let him share a little bit, but before I do that, I'm going to give you all a chance, both online and on site, to actually send in questions for both of our guests today. All right, so if you can scan the QR code that we have on screen, if you have any burning questions or you have some feedback, some comments that you want to give them, hopefully, positive comments, but yeah, encouragement for them. But you can get onto that QR code. It'll take you to the space where you can send in some questions, and we'll get to your questions really soon. But while we're doing that, let's move on to Ed. And Ed, is there anything you want to say, to your audience today? Yeah, you can share a little bit about your story and what led you to be part of this project.
So, as a lot of people in the room and online can probably relate, being LGBT and Christian is not a good combination, so it makes for a depressing period in your life. And so going down that path, I remember every few years I would just go through this super deep depression and then kind of pop back out and in survival mode, so to speak, and just still up until 2012 thinking, maybe I can afford good counseling one day, or maybe they're going to make a pill that can make me straight, or maybe I can figure out how to pray away the gay. And so I just continued to go down that path, and then stumbled upon this lady named Kathy Baldock, who is in the movie, and she's a straight cisgender white woman who just gives these amazing presentations. And one of the many things that she said was that the word homosexual was not in the Bible until 1946. And having had gone to seminary, I found that kind of a wow factor to me. Like, how could that have happened? And then I started thinking, 1946 wasn't that long ago. People are still alive today that were around then. Maybe there was someone in that room taking notes, and we could glean from them, how did they make this decision, and what was going through their mind, and why did they make this decision, and what went into that process. And so I started stalking the descendants of the translators on that translation team, the Revised Standard Version. And I found, I had charts and graphs on the descendants, and I thought maybe I can talk to them. And did your grandfather say anything about this? And his Dr. Weigel, who's the head of the translation team, I know his great-grandson now, and he's a friend of mine. And so we've been able to communicate and everything. And he said, yeah, I remember all the flack that the family talked about. It was in such uproar when this Bible came out in the 1940s. And the reason was because, 1940s and 50s, the reason was because they were updating the English language, right? And so they said, people are kind of having a hard time with the King James. And so he would get good responses. Thank you so much. I finally understand what the Bible means in some of these passages. And then he would get people that were angry. How dare you take out thee and thou? And, you've changed the Bible. So they would have these Bible burning ceremonies. And they would burn Bibles, and they would pack up the ashes and send them to Dr. Weigel. And the family remembers him getting these things. And, his life work, people would treat it like that. So there was a lot going on at that time. But I just have tons of questions. My mom says I was always asking too many questions. Turns out to be a good thing, huh, Rocky? And so one of my questions was just, how did this happen? So in digging in, and I thought maybe interviewing people to find out, any information we could find. And then one day I stumbled across 90 boxes of archived material at Yale University, and left by the translation team. And I was like, this is amazing. And so I thought, okay, maybe this is available online, so I can kind of do some study online and see what's in there. And they said, no, these are not available online. You have to come in person. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I called Kathy Baldock, and she said, I'm going with you. And so sure enough, in September of 2017, we went to Yale University to dig through the archives. And it was an amazing experience. And I can tell you, we had so many people back at our home base praying for us and just seeking the Lord to make sure we can find whatever we need to find. Because think about it. We went through 120,000 sheets, including both the physical sheets and the parts in the microfilm, to dig through looking for information. They had it very well organized, so we could kind of go to certain sections that we wanted to. But it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. And talk about a big haystack, okay? So we had people praying for us, just that we would find certain things. And I was finding things in my section, and Kathy was finding some things over there, but it was nothing that would really give us enough information to know how did they make this decision. And I remember it was on the third day that we found the answer to our question. And the interesting thing is, I'm so glad it took it to the third day, because we went into this research. For me, it was personal. I wanted to know, what does God really have to say about being LGBT and Christian? This was my own personal search. And I went into it saying, I just want the truth, and whatever the answers are, I'm not looking to prove one side or the other. I just want facts and information. I'm going to use those facts and information in my relationship with God to come to a conclusion where I can actually wake up and not hate myself. And because I know I'm within what God wants me to do on this. And so, at any rate, so we're going through these. In the first 3 days, we got to know the translation team so well. They left behind everything. We even had grocery lists in the archives, and be sure and get some peas to bring to the cabin this weekend. And it's like, okay. But it was just so many details. And the section where we found information was in the personal letters. And you can see the movie and find out how the discovery and we made and how it went from there. But I want to share some things that are not in the movie that I thought were really interesting. And so we went there thinking, did they make this decision from a nefarious standpoint? Did they go into this saying, aha, those horrible homosexuals, let's kind of change the Bible a little bit and do it this way or do it that way? And so I had to, as a researcher, you create theories. Like, this might be a possible theory, but if you can't check off all the boxes under that theory, then you have to throw that theory away and move on. And so one of my theories was that they started to see what was going on at that time in history. And if you think about 1946, World War II has ended. Soldiers are coming back by the boatloads, literally, and they're being dumped off at these huge port cities in America. And, San Francisco is a big port city, LA is a big port city, and New York is a big port city. So my thinking was that what happened during that time, because we already know as a fact, after World War II, we see the modern day gay bar movement kind of start to grow in a certain way. So a lot of these soldiers, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, before they went back home to small town Arkansas, they hung out in the big city and they discovered things about themselves that they didn't know. And so they would go to these gay bars and meet other people and just be able to be themselves before they returned to a farm somewhere in the country. And so as a result, my thought and my theory that I was putting together was we started to see a lot of arrests during that time, and it would be in the newspapers. 50 homosexuals were arrested yesterday on Christopher Street in New York. And so we would see all these types of things in history. So in my mind, the translators, which every translator is a product of their culture, regardless of what you think or believe or what, we are all products of our culture and our experiences. And so I thought maybe they were just a little antagonistic toward that. And if you look at the Greek words and you kind of move it around a little bit, you can get to the word homosexual, not in a very accurate way. And so because they saw this in the newspapers, I thought that's what was going on, which was a little nefarious. But when we got there and we dug through the archives, these were amazing, godly men. 22 translators on this team, 22 men, and they were just amazing. I can remember letters that we found in the archives, and they would write to Dr. Weigel, and then Dr. Weigel would write back. And Dr. Weigel wrote a couple of letters. He was the dean of the Yale Divinity School, and Dr. Weigel was also the head of this translation team that was kind of started around 1929. And so Dr. Weigel would write these letters and say, I notice in your church you have no women on your committee, but you have women in your church. You need to put women in your committee so that they're represented. And another community, he would write and say, you have no black people on your committee, but yet you have black people in your church and in your community. So he would encourage them to do this. But one of the most impressive letters that Dr. Weigel received was this lady who wrote in, and basically in her letter, she says, Dr. Weigel, I'm just a housewife. Nobody's gonna listen to me, but you're the dean of the Yale Divinity School, and we have a problem in our community. There is a poll tax that's required if you want to vote, P-O-L-L, poll. So at that period of time, in that particular community, in order to register to vote, you had to pay $1, and she explained it in her letter. So you had to pay $1 to have the right to vote. And this is in the 1930s, the Great Depression. And so she wrote to Dr. Weigel, and she said, if people have $1, they're gonna spend it on food for their family. They're not gonna spend it on a registration card to vote. So could you please write to Congress and tell them that this is an injustice? And he wrote back to her, yes, ma'am, you're absolutely right. This is an injustice. I will write to Congress. And since that day, we have no longer had a poll tax. They find other ways for voter suppression, obviously, but a poll tax is against the law. So we just found it amazing, this godly team of people that were just really loving the Lord. And in fact, when, these days when you study in archives, you can just use your iPhone and your smartphone and go in there and take pictures of pages and get a really clear page for research purposes. And they had all these sermons. I was taking pictures of these sermons. I'm gonna use this one day. This is excellent. So I found all kinds of cool stuff in the archives. And these were just so amazing people that they did this. So then by the third day, we got to know them. By the third day, we saw their hearts. And this is another thing. Dr. Weigel had a huge heart for China and started a lot of mission projects in China. He had a heart for Japan. He started these whole things that what we might call, I say we could call him the father of the modern Sunday school movement, because he created curriculum for children to learn Bible stories, and that really wasn't done on a mass scale before that. So he just was an amazing person that loved God. And so when we went into the archives, we were able to see and learn and know him more intimately before we came upon the discovery. So it gave a point of reference to what they were saying in these exchange of letters.
Thank you
But
so much
then-
for that, Ed.
Well, no, but I mean, and then the outcome.
Yeah.
That was, which is in the film, so no spoilers.
Yeah, so
No
if you
spoiler
haven't
alert,
watched
sorry.
the film, the point is that you need to go watch it, because it's like, this is the whole behind the scenes thing, right? And if anything, did you hear what Ed said? They started the research in 2017. 2017, the number of years of hard work, of heart, of putting it together, of telling the story. I mean, weaving that story so beautifully. I mean, wow, kudos to all of you and your
And
team.
our editor and our other producer, Jenna.
Right? Oh,
Jill Woodward is magic. if anybody ever needs an editor.
Yeah, your editor is amazing, I must say. I mean, so much material. Yeah, and so I know you all have probably a lot of questions. So let's go check out the questions, okay, and see what kind of questions we have up there. And our very first question is for Ed. Hi, Ed. I'm touched about your vulnerability when you were asked about intimacy in the movie. How has it been like for you since after the movie?
So,
Just right off the bat, they give it to you.
okay. So if you haven't seen the movie, there's a very vulnerable spot for me. I can't even talk because I'm intimidated here. So I'm asked certain questions that kind of get into there, and it just really ate at me. And so it's interesting because the behind-the-scenes part of that one is Rocky's friend Jenna, who she's known for 100 years, was the one who interviewed me. Who interviewed me for that part. And the thing is with Jenna, I feel like I'm just sitting there talking with her, and it's a heart-to-heart thing. And so I just forgot the cameras were on, and we're having this conversation, and I'm talking and sharing some things, and honestly, when Rocky first showed me that part and how, hey, this is gonna make the final cut in the movie, I was like, oh no, can I change my mind? Because it was very vulnerable, and I decided that's embarrassing for me to see it. Every time I see it, I kind of want to crawl under my seat. But if it's going to save lives, put it out there. That's what it's there for. And so, and basically, I'm answering a question about intimacy and how the church does not allow or want, us as LGBT people. We need to kind of stay single and celibate and on our own. And what are your thoughts about that? And so I'm like, how can I have thoughts like that? I don't really know what true emotional intimacy means if I've never been allowed to have it in the context of the church. And so just kind of going down that path and everything. And so that is, I'm going to say, still a learning experience for me, and probably should be for all of us if we want to really grow. But if you really want to find out more details, you got to take me out for a drink to find out. So.
Thanks, Ed, for holding that space, because it was such a moving and also difficult space. And I think as an audience, we could feel it with you, that moment. And like you said, right, if it could save lives, you would totally leave it in there. And so you are definitely saving lives, So thank you for allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Thank you for allowing you to be seen so others can feel seen. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's see if we have any other questions. Miak, do you... Okay. Rocky, what was your coming out like with your family? Ooh.
So, and we see this in the film. I didn't really have a coming out. I was found out. And so in my story in the film, we see how my dad suspected that he really was just suspecting that I was out drinking and hanging out with the wrong crowd kind of thing. And then he read the diary and he was like, oh, it's a lot more than I thought it was. And so that was devastating, as you can imagine. And I was 18 at the time. I just graduated high school, and my dad wrote me the letter, which we see in the film as well. And there's no emotion in that letter, and it's just everything that the church was to me at the time, which is something I know I don't want to be a part of. I don't want to be a part of this. You're still not seeing me, and then you're just going to throw Bible verses at me. And then at the end of the letter, which we don't put in the film, were a list of rules for me to stay in the house. And so I was like, see ya. And I left home, and I never looked back. So then from there, I learned later through this whole experience what my parents went through. And my mom was like, oh, you better go get her back. My dad was in trouble. But they were devastated too, as you can imagine. And then I got to learn what a parent goes through with this. And so what they ended up doing was seeking counseling. And in the church, they send parents of LGBTQ kids to grief counseling, like they had lost a child. And so they were, and I'm just like, I'm not dead, So that was just really interesting, just something I just didn't really think about. But all this process, and so even to answer the first question, like what were some of our goals in making the film? And I think Ed, Kathy, and I all share this perspective of learning from other people, listening to the other side, being able to use the information that we're getting to make a better film and to be better communicators through the work that we're doing. So those lessons were really important. And now, we're still talking, my parents and I. We don't really get into the details, but and then the film too as well. For any there's another spoiler. You know, it's, the scene with me and my dad, where it's like, you don't know me, I can't talk about my life. And it's still like that. There are a lot of things about my life that they don't know and I don't share with them. And maybe one day I will. But when you know they don't want to know or they don't care, you know, I would rather share that with people that do care. So it's challenging. And then one other thing I want to say for anybody who watched the Q&A last night, or if you rewatch it online, they were asking me, how is it possible for you to even be in relationship with your family? And we talked about that was a choice for me to be able to be an influence with them, to get out of loneliness, to be in relationship with them. And so I didn't have to look back 25 years later and say, I wish, or what if, and I don't know them. But I also wanted to emphasize, which I didn't last night, that this walk that I'm doing is not for everyone. The only reason why it works for me is because my parents are mature enough to not beat me down about it all the time. But if your loved ones are not able to be mature in that way, it is very much okay to say, this is not healthy and I can't be in relationship with you. So every walk is different, and I just want to encourage you so people don't feel like, oh, I need to try that. If it's hurting you, you do not need to try that. And it does hurt. It still hurts me every day, but yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for sharing all that, and also kind of balancing out this whole journey, right, for different people, because we come from different families with very different dynamics. And we need to make the decisions about what's most loving and what's most life-giving for both us and for our family members, right? And I think that would be our guiding kind of principles, whatever circumstances any of us might be in, especially with respect to family, because it can be complex and it can be challenging, you know. And I'm so glad you're finding that way to navigate that, because it's such a testimony and an embodiment of what love looks like in the midst of disagreement. And so much for us to learn from that. But at the same time, it may not be able to be applied in every circumstance in every family. And you know, I just wanted to actually bounce it over to Ed. And you know, I wonder, Ed, would you like to share with us a little bit about how things are like for you and your family? Because I know that your family is pretty conservative, and you know, it's been challenging in different ways.
So my family, I was raised Southern Baptist, which is very conservative, if you're familiar with how that mindset is. And so I just never felt comfortable to come out to my family for a while. And then finally, when I was ready to come out, my dad had vascular dementia, so there were some health issues at home, and I knew that he was heading downhill. And so when I'm ready to, and he continues to go downhill, I'm going to be blamed forever for the demise and his death. And so I was very close to my entire family, and my dad passed away in 2014. And so I gave my mom about a year just to mourn before we had this discussion. So she flew out from Texas to where I live in California, and I came out to her, and initially she laughed because she thought I was joking, because how is that even possible? You know, you're a Christian, you can't be gay, kind of thing. And so I told her that I'm starting on this journey of kind of studying and learning what the Bible really has to say by digging into it more deeply. And at the beginning, she was more welcoming, which surprised me. And then I came out to my sister after that, and then I came out to my youngest brother, who I was very close to. I was the best man in his wedding. We were very good friends. We hung out all the time. He's married, and I would hang out with him and his wife. They would come to see me. I would go to see them, and just a really good relationship. And so when I came out to him, the entire family situation changed. And he got so angry in that 20-minute conversation that he yelled at me on the phone so loudly that he outed me to his wife, who was 2 rooms away. And I talked to him one more time since then, and we haven't spoken in years. And so it's very sad to me, because I was so close, and I felt like I lost someone who died. And so a best friend, and just kind of put my face on my pillow for a couple years and kind of to deal with that. And it was very painful. Because he didn't even want to sit and listen to me just talk about my story. He had already decided, and so there was no communication and conversation. And so the weird thing is, I think what I realized was, he was never the person I thought he was. Because the person I thought he was would have sat and listened, whether they agree with me or not. They would have been in conversation and communication and shown love. And I was like, well, maybe he never was that person, apparently. So I mourned. It felt like I was mourning the death of someone in that whole context there. And so, now he turned the whole family against me. And so my mom is mad at me for whatever, because I can't figure out how to reconnect with him in a way that I feel safe. But that's what Rocky was saying. Some people, you can continue that communication. Some people, you cannot. And I had to make an active decision to keep in communication with my mom, because even if we're just going to talk about the weather for the rest of my life and something superficial, I want her in my life, and I want to be in her life. But I just felt the poison and toxicity of my brother in a relationship with there was not something I wanted to pursue. And it just felt like, why do we LGBT people always have to defend our existence? It's just, I get exhausted sometimes, and I don't want to have to do that at home. So I told my mom, I want a relationship with you, and I need time away from him. And if you're not okay with that, then you let me know now, because I don't, I need to work through this right now. And so she respected that. Now she's in full disagreement with me, but we talk pretty often. She saw the movie, and Rocky's dad was her hero. But so at any rate, it's just kind of going through that. It just makes it hard, because we were very close as a family, just very close as a family, and to see that, where we are right now, and it's like you lose your tribe. And I know why some people go through reparative therapy after they've come out, or they transition and then detransition, because they've lost their tribe. And they're saying, as much as I need to be myself, I need my tribe, and they're willing to give up certain things to get that tribe back. So I see that, and I get that, and it's just a sad situation that we're in. But I still have hope for my family to kind of pick some things up. My sister, I think, is going to be more likely to come along than anybody in the family. And I'm holding on, and with hope.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Ed. I can only imagine how hard it has been for you, and how hard it is even having to share this, right? But thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people here, whether on-site or online, who has had similar struggles with family, and just being able to hear their story kind of being articulated by someone else just helps someone feel less alone, and so thank you for sharing that. And I totally, am with you on hope. It took decades for my parents to shift in their perspective. I mean, I'm thankful they did, but it's an ongoing journey, right? And so that's something we hope and pray for each other and for our families, right? That they will begin to see that this is a journey for them as well. Yeah. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. Ed, what has continued to give you hope in your day-to-day struggles?
The most exciting thing about all of this is the emails and messages we get from people, and they say, thank you for saving my life. So it's just been so encouraging to see that. We get our share of hate mail, but we also get those, mostly we get the emails from people that just find us somehow. They find my work where I'm at in my company, and they email me there. So I guess they're stalking me. So
They must be.
so it's really good to hear those stories and see what's going on there, and exciting. Just a quick one. There was this lady in India that contacted me about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and she said, "Are you the Ed Oxford from this, this documentary or this article that was written or these other things?" And at first you're kind of like, maybe. It depends on why you want to know. And so I was like, yeah. And so she said, my son just attempted suicide yesterday for the second time. And so she said, my son is gay, and I'm just, beyond myself on what to do. But if what you're talking about is real, because they were Christians in India, she said, then I need to talk to you. So I Zoomed with her and kind of had several talks with her and connected her to some of the Mama Bears and Free Mom Hugs groups. There's a couple of groups out there that do amazing jobs. And so we just had some communication, and over the next few weeks and months, I continued to talk with her in dialogue, on texting and through Zoom calls, and she said, my son wants to talk to you. And I said, okay, sure. And so they got on the phone, and I'm talking to her son, and we're in this conversation and everything, and then I'm like, your mom said that you're gay, but are you sure you're not transgender? And then she started crying and said, yes, I'm transgender. And I'm too afraid to tell my family, my mom and my dad, because in India, if you're transgender, it means people think you're a prostitute. And she said, I'm not a prostitute. She said, this is me. This is how God made me. And I started crying, and she started crying, and we had this conversation. And then she said, could you please do me a favor and tell my mom that I'm transgender, because I can't get it out of my mouth. I was like, oh, man. So she put her mom back on the phone, and I said, you have an amazing, beautiful, wonderful daughter. And she's like, what? And so she starts crying, I start crying, the daughter starts crying, and everything. And it was just like a wow factor. And the relationship started to just go into a different direction and grow and blossom and bloom. And so then about a year later, I was working on an LGBT party somewhere, and then my phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing. And it was calls from India. It was coming from the daughter. It was coming from the mom. And they kept calling. And I said, this might be an emergency. I need to get on the phone. And so I picked up the phone, and they said, we are at the hospital right now, and she's about to get some surgery. She's about to go under. And we wanted to call you and say thank you. And the daughter got on the phone, and she said, my mom is here with me right now. There's no way this would have happened if you wouldn't have stepped in and kind of helped along. And you're just like, wow. And they have this great relationship now, and they sent me this picture, and she is gorgeous. They sent me this picture, and it's our first picture as mother and daughter is how it's titled. And I'm just like, wow. So just to kind of see that those are the types of things that are going to be happening, going forward with this type of ministry, so to speak, and we're all going to be involved in this.
Oh.
And that gets me every time.
I know, right? I mean, yeah. Oh. That is so amazing to hear, and thank you for sharing that, And given that yesterday was your Asia premiere, I think this is only going to grow and continue because, we really want to get this movie out in all the many different languages in Asia. We want to make sure that everyone who needs to hear it and to see it will get a chance to access it, right, in some way, and that more people's lives may be changed, right? Yeah. So, a big word of thanks, from the next comment. Thank you very much for coming to Singapore, and thanks for presenting this story and for sharing all of your amazing stories, for opening yourself up to us this way. Okay, how do you respond when someone asks why God would allow such a major translation to be in the Bible given the harm it would cause? Ooh.
So we have to look at the big picture of things. And when we look at the Bible is a joint venture between a holy and perfect God and those of us who are imperfect. Translations are not perfect because they involve people to be involved in that particular translation. So I don't know if when you guys were kids, did you play that telephone game? Where you
broken telephone.
Broken
right?
telephone.
Where
so
you pass
have
a message.
You
right?
pass a message through their ear, and it goes around, and it's something completely different by the time it gets there. Well, that takes place in a game that's about 20 minutes. But think about what would take place in something that was 2,000 years ago from us, right? And being translated into multiple languages and transmission of that over time, and a different culture, a different language, a different time period. So I see in this situation that when we look at the big picture of things, yes, it's bad. Yes, sin is in the world. Yes, there are bad things that happen. And none of us really have a good answer for why bad things happen. And there are philosophers and classes on that entire topic and through universities to kind of go and to tackle that. But one of the things we have to realize, or that I look at when I look at that, I don't blame God when I see that. I see that God's message has always been there. I see that man kind of jacked it up and made some problems there. And so when I see that there are over 450 English translations since the first translation in English came out by Wycliffe in 1378. So if you think about that, obviously 450 people didn't agree or they wouldn't have had that many translations. And so people ask all the time, what's the best Bible translation that you would recommend? I get that question all the time. Answer, the Greek and the Hebrew, right? But if we don't know Greek and Hebrew, then I always say, just try multiple translations because you can get kind of a better view of it. But let's return to the way we were about 120 years ago when we had more humility when we went to read the Bible. And we started going into that, and we would learn from each other and kind of dig in there and help, or allow the Holy Spirit to help us to learn what we're seeing in there. And so I think, we're seeing just so much pride involved. In the U.S., we have something called Christian nationalism that's trying to take over right now. And it's just a lot of pride involved in that type of thing. But I think we just need to turn back to that humility and that approach of reading the Bible. But I think it's not the first time something like this has happened. The Bible was abused and misused to allow slavery for thousands of years, right? And so we have to involve a lot of other things. So when we look at Scripture, the Wesleyan quadrilateral, so those of you who are Methodist,
Yep.
the Wesleyan quadrilateral, we have to look at a few other things. We have to look at experience, and we have to look at reason. We need to look at all these other things. So when I was in seminary, if I wrote a paper and I didn't access the latest archaeological finds on some piece that I was writing about, or how psychology entered in that, or how the other science and all the other disciplines, if I'm not accessing that, I'm going to get a bad grade on my paper. And it's so bizarre because I talk to theologians and professors, seminary professors all the time. And it's so strange because they will go all in on accessing other disciplines when they're studying any other topic. When they get to the LGBT topic, they no longer want to look at other disciplines. It's like, something's not quite going to the top there. And I'm like, why are you not accessing these other disciplines? Why are you not taking those things into account? And so if we had not listened by using one of the Wesleyan quadrilateral portions of experience, if we had not listened to slaves 200 years ago in the U.S. when we had slavery, we would have taken a lot longer time to get out of that mess, right? But saying, hey, we have to look at the big picture of things and listen to people and their experience and what's going on. Because if our experience doesn't match something we see in Scripture, then maybe the problem's with us, it's not with Scripture. Maybe we're reading something wrong in that particular portion. It's just like Galileo. Galileo discovered 4 moons orbiting Jupiter in 1610. And when he did that and started writing about his findings, he got in big trouble. The church says, how dare you? There are 5 clobber passages in the Old Testament that say the earth is shaken and it will not be moved, that the sun rises and the sun sets, so obviously the sun's moving, not the earth. So they thought the earth was in the middle, and the church taught this. The earth is in the middle, and everything else is moving around it. And Galileo said, I know that, but look in this telescope. Do you know what I see when I'm looking in this telescope? And the church says, we don't need to look in your telescope. We see what Scripture says. And today, a first grader knows how our solar system looks, right? We don't question that at all. But he went to prison for that. He was in prison for the rest of his life in home arrest. And they finally apologized to him 350 years later. So as a result, we can see this isn't the first time we've done something like this, and it will not be the last. And so we just need to constantly check ourselves, accountability, humbly walk through things as we see something's there, and realize, don't let these crazy Christians hijack the true meaning that is in Scripture. Okay? Don't let them take away what has been there all along. And you have no idea how many LGBT people I talked to took time away just from church, from the Bible, from prayer and everything, and they come back and they're like, the Bible is in color. It's not black and white. I loved the Bible before, but I really love it now, and I'm really seeing what God is trying to say. And so
right.
I think because we have a more accurate perspective of God when we kind of walk through this, and we're not putting God in a small box. We're seeing how great and amazing He is. When we see that He loves us as LGBT people, He's never been against us, never. And yes, Jesus would be at my gay wedding.
Yes, turning water into wine. Yep. At the back. Yeah. The live questions. Okay, we can take one from the live questions. Just hold on a moment. Okay. We're going to pass you a mic, okay? So hold on to your question. I'll let Ed answer this question first. We'll get you a mic. Hi, Ed. How much did you spend on all the Bibles on your shelf?
So you've seen my book
Oh,
collection.
yeah, I've seen it in real life. Oh, my. It's like a library. It's amazing.
So I search for really good deals, and I find things that are really good from dealers, book dealers all over the world. And I know what I'm looking for, so when I find it, I'm going to try and get that one. So I'm very specific and particular about the types of books that I want that are going to really integrate in this particular conversation. So what I spent on it, I don't know, but it's been valued between $100,000 and $150,000. Wow. So.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Now I know all the treasure in his house.
Well, so we went to a conference in Arizona, and he's like, there's a Bible museum there, and there's a book dealer there, and we're going to go, and we're going. And he's like, dealing. You bought something there, the two,
I'm
right?
a nerd. Yeah, I'm a nerd. I bought this one piece. It's kind of cool. So that's why I'm saying I get some good deals. There's this piece. I kind of show it in the movie a little bit, but it's one page from the Torah. It's 1523. Yeah. It's my oldest page. My oldest book since the movie. I have an old book from 1549 as a dictionary. But I bought that one page for $149. And 4 years later, I found out it was valued at $10,000.
Woohoo!
No,
Wow, it's an investment.
That's that scene in the movie. I love it so much. And like, if you see all the rest of the footage, he says it forever. This is my favorite piece. This is my most favorite. Oh, I love this piece. Oh, it's just like, it's so cute. You're so cute.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking when I was watching the movie. It's like, oh, that's your favorite one page, and this is my favorite oldest book, and this is my favorite and this is my favorite New Testament mobile thing. Yeah, it was so cool. Okay, let's take a question from the floor.
Hi, nice to meet you, Rocky. Looking forward to watching a movie, and thanks for sharing a story. And Pauline, I love you. Okay, I didn't want to type this because I have a question, but I think I have to give you a little context for you to be able to answer the question. It would be too long to type it down. So, like you've shared earlier, I think a lot of gay Christians, we do kind of distance ourselves from the church. Myself, that's very true. I've stopped going to church for over 10 years. I always see it as I love God, but I hate Christians because, some of Christians could be, for me personally, Christians have been the most judgmental, non-accepting, harsh and critical people, more so than non-Christians of the LGBTQ community. And just want to share an experience. Last week, I met this Christian, and he would say stuff like, you're not a real Christian. You're just choosing your own version of Christianity that is against God, that's not according to the Bible. And even when I shared with him an article in The Guardian that was about this film and, how the word homosexuality didn't exist till 1946, his response was outright rejection, not interested. We have different beliefs. I'm mainstream. I don't agree with you. So I guess my question is kind of first of all, it's really hurtful. It's incredibly hurtful to hear people say this and in your face and then double down, right? And given that you've shared how much work goes behind your documentary and how it's all based on facts and information, and essentially you're just kind of clearing this mistranslation stuff, right? How do we as the minority in society, right, whether it's in the Christian world or in Singapore society, how do we kind of find footing with people who just don't want to hear or listen or find out or read an article about your film or even watch your film? They just don't want to hear about anything. They've accepted, like you said, right, in academia, you have to look at the latest stuff like that, but they've already accepted this is the truth, this is the Bible, and they've lived their whole lives believing this is the truth. So they wouldn't want to hear anything new because it's oh, it's just some new thing that's not true. And how do we navigate that?
You can probably answer that better than me. Okay. Well, so those kinds of Christians would even say that you can't even call yourself a Christian if you're an ally. So you don't even have to be a gay Christian to not be accepted. And one thing I always like to remind people is that Christians can't even agree on our own theology. We have so many different types of Christians, so many different beliefs within it, and so that should be a clue that this is a people issue, not anything else. And so how I navigate it is just
we were talking about, and one of the reasons my dad is in the film to show that we're not going to change everybody's mind, and there's people exist, and we have to navigate them. But our job is to provide good information so enough people will be able to move with us and be able to recognize new information. And as Kathy says, as we know more, are we doing better? What are we doing about it? And so my hope is in the next generation. My hope is in, and even some of the older generations that are getting it. Yeah. But we have the power and the ability to change and shift culture back, which is why we made a film in the way that we did, non-threatening, not an us versus them, doing the right tones to have a conversation to really lead to change and not just propaganda or we've been hurt and you guys stink, Christians, so. Yeah, no.
That's one thing I really appreciated about this film, right? Because it was done in such a journalistic manner, right? Really facts, research, representing you the information, you go decide what you're going to do with that, right? Ed?
Every couple of years, every couple of 100 years, we have a similar situation come down in history. Right now, this is the one for us in our generation, you guys. Right. Whether you like it or not, you want it or not, this is our time in history. About 200 years ago, we had the whole slavery issue that we were dealing with in several countries throughout the world, right? And so kind of working through that. And we can learn from their situation, we can learn from their mistakes, and we can see some similarities that took place 200 years ago. And so I buy a lot of old books, in case you don't know that by now, and some of them were written during that period of the abolitionist movement, and some pastors are writing these books to justify keeping slavery. Yes, pastors. Churches were trying to keep this, and they were utilizing the Bible for that. And this one pastor's mentality in going into this, he said, if we end slavery, that would be a very wrong thing to do, because we see, there's examples of slavery or some things about, we see the word slavery and things like that in the Bible. And he said, we might as well throw away our entire Bible because we're not following it if we need to keep slavery in order to live this biblical lifestyle. I mean, how messed up is that, right? But at the time, people were buying it, right? And the people you're talking to are buying some of the stuff that they're being fed that's not true, right? A couple hundred years before slavery, what were we going through? The Great Reformation. We've studied that in our history books, right? And so they were like, wait, the church is corrupt, and what are they doing? And we can't even understand the Bible because it's in Latin, and so it gets translated in multiple languages, and we see a whole different situation going on. A couple hundred years before that, we have the Crusades, right? Using the Bible to justify killing other people, going to other countries and killing them in order to let Christianity propagate. I mean, aren't we messed up humans? And so this is our lot in life in these days, and we're dealing with that. And I think one conversation I've had with a lot of people is they say, when I'm talking to a conservative Christian, they say, I don't like to talk to people about this because they get angry and we get into a fight and it's just not pretty, or even the interactions you see online. But they say, Ed, you're just making sense from things and you seem so calm and mellow when you do that. They don't know what's going on the inside, but because of that approach, the audience will listen and they'll go a step further and kind of be involved in some of those types of things. And we're not going to see a change overnight, but we're going to see little changes here and there. I've asked one question to so many people here in Singapore. How long do you think before gay marriage is going to be legal in Singapore? And the soonest answer I think I heard was 15 years, and the farthest was 50. And so you guys know your culture, your land, and what's going on here, and you know how things change, and it takes a long time to get there. And so it's really hard in the meantime. And so, the funny thing is, people will be all over me about, oh, well, my Bible says this about homosexuality. And I'm like, well, how old is your Bible? And they're like, 1995? Well, mine is from 1695. So which one are we going to kind of listen to and go there? Because it didn't always say this. And so I've done a deep dive, and we didn't get a chance to do that in the movie, but I've done a deep dive on how other Bible translations walk through the clobber passages. And so this is another thing, that these people are not, LGBT Christians are more educated on this topic than the vast majority of pastors throughout the world, okay? So when you're going into that, realize, don't go into there prideful thinking, I know more than you do, but realizing if you're talking to a first grader about space physics, right? And they only have a first grade level of that physics class, and you've got your master's degree in physics, you're gonna have to tone it down and be careful and be patient with that first grader, right? And be gracious. And I see God being gracious with us. And can I turn that graciousness around to people around me? I saw God being gracious with me when I couldn't figure things out. And I was horrible going through this whole process over the years. It took me a long time to figure out. And I had more skin in the game than these straights do, right? Yet, how in the world are they going to get to that point if we don't have patience with them and kind of guide them through? So I think to have compassion and love toward these people is hard as it can be, but it's necessary. And to continue to learn, because when they are ready and willing to have those conversations about the deep things and start talking about it. Like I'll start off a conversation. Hey, did you know, yes, there are 6 passages in the Bible that condemn homosexual acts, but there are over 200 passages in the Bible that condemn heterosexual acts. Straight people need more guidance, I guess. I don't know. But yes, and so we have to look into those passages more in depth. What specific activities are being condemned here, right? What is going on in these passages? And assumptions have been made. And part of my research when I did, probably 10 years ago when I started getting into this, I went for the jugular. I went to some of the most anti-gay theologians and pieces out there I could find. And sometimes I would just say, I need a month away from this. And I would just cry because I was just so sad. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, what are they saying? And what category can I put it in? And I had various categories. And so I had, is this coming from Scripture? Is this based on Old Testament or New Testament? And where are they basing this on? And the vast majority of the stuff they were putting out there was conjecture and opinion. And it came out of a lot of the stuff in the U.S. in the 1970s when this whole anti-gay movement started coming out. Because remember the 70s, if you saw the movie, that's when these Bible translations finally provided ammunition from the pulpit to bang against LGBT people in a way that we never saw before, okay? So for a very long time, 1 Corinthians 6:9 was never considered an anti-gay passage. And I can show you things throughout history. I do seminars and everything. So in all the studying that I've done, I don't see it start to go down that path until the late 1800s at the earliest. So remember, 1946 is the first time that the word homosexual ends up in the Bible. And then it gets translated into these other versions in the 60s that come out in the 70s. Pastors have ammunition, and they use it, and they go down this path. So a lot of things people say, oh, well, people choose to be gay. How many people in the room chose to be LGBT? Please raise your hand, because I've interviewed thousands, and I've never met a person, maybe they're out there, but we are told things about ourselves that are not even true, right? They're not even dealing with facts. They're not working with facts. So one thing I say is, at the very least, let's work with facts. And if you're going by something that's an opinion, let's investigate it a little bit more. But we need to be committed to truth. We need to be committed to facts. And if you're going to say things about me as an LGBT person that's not true, how many times have you guys heard people say, oh, all LGBT people are pedophiles, they're after children? Come on, seriously? Not even a chance. So they don't know these things, and they say things that aren't true. So part of it is the education process. But keep in mind, these are first graders, and you're talking physics.
Well, and as we look at the history too, Kathy in her work was trying to see how did pastors deal with this issue prior to 1946. And she did a search through the Pastoral Council magazine in the United States and went through every single magazine, and she couldn't find any pastor using a clobber passage against the LGBTQ community until the 70s. Prior to that, and what happened in the 1970s, the American Psychiatric Association declassified homosexuality as being a mental illness. So once society deemed us well and fit, that's when the church took it on as a social, cultural issue. And we can trace it in history. Prior to that, the pastors would have been like, this is a medical issue, and we need to send our same-sex, they wouldn't use the word same-sex attracted, our homosexual congregant member to a medical doctor to get fixed. And so it just switched, but we can see, and then that's when like the moral majority and other people clamped down on this being a culture war issue to politicize it for their own power and gain. And so this is a clear abuse and scapegoating a group of people for power. It's a power grab. And so all we want to do is lay out the history, the facts, and as we mentioned last night, we're going to be doing a workbook, and Kathy's going to be doing an in-depth book. He's going to be doing a personal book, so we can provide good information so you can use it to talk with your friends, right? And have these intelligent conversations and have all the tools that you would need.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, that was amazing. And so, Rocky, what was it like including your father in the film? And what was your thought process behind that decision?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. So the thought process, you know, we're making a movie about the Bible. We're in conferences. We're talking about some pretty heady stuff, and we did want to make an academic film. There were really important things that we wanted to put in there. But we wanted to contextualize how it plays out in our real lives. And so if you look through the credits, you'll see about a dozen people that we interviewed that didn't make it in the film. And we were trying to find that storyline while we were out working. And now my story was always kind of there, and Jenna, who's worked with us for 100 years, knows my dad, knows my story and the whole thing. So we always knew that he would be a great representation, and he's a perfect representation of what a conservative thinks and how they, and he's strong in his convictions. He's an honorable man in that way, and so he would have been a good subject. But we didn't really know he was going to be in the film, and how it kind of accidentally happened, because the first time that I learned about the 1946 mistranslation was the first day we filmed with my dad and my mom in the room. It's just a coincidence, or maybe it's God, I don't know. Where when I first learned of Kathy Boldock, 4 weeks after I knew who she was, and I binged watched her, I'm like, this woman's amazing. I found out she was coming into LA to do a seminar in October of 2018. And the month prior, I'm like, I'm going to make a movie on affirming theology. I had no idea what it was going to be about. And then I sat in that conference with my mom and dad, who just happened to be in LA for the second time ever, that I've lived there for a decade, you know, and just started filming. And so it was then that I learned of the 1946 mistranslation. Then my dad got up and asked a great question. It was all on camera. So it just was a perfect recipe for us to be that storyline. We didn't know that he would say yes and sign the release form. He signed the release form a year later, and then, okay, we're the storyline. So we were already 2 years into making the movie. So now we're trying to figure out how do we shape my story around it. And the editor's like, well, you can't sit in the interview chair. You're not going to be the director, and we're not going to interview you. It just isn't good storytelling. It's not good documentary work. And we're like, okay, well, what do we do? But then also what we ended up doing, that's why I'm narrating the film, it afforded us an opportunity to kind of piece the movie together a little bit, give us a little bit of fluidity, but then also break the fourth wall and bring the audience in with us. And so that's why we see the cameras, and we're like, we're making a documentary, and we want to take you on this journey with us. So we used it as a tool to make a better movie. But what was it like filming with my dad? So it was very painful, and I'm sure it was very painful for him as well, having to relive a lot of this stuff. So everything the conversations that we've had, maybe we didn't have them in the movie, we didn't have them as directly, but they were always there. But having to relive those moments. And that scene where we're in the living room, and, you know, I'm like, well, what if this is my ministry? What if this is, you know, that day was probably the most frustrating and the hardest scene to shoot. And even the cameraman at one point put the camera down and was like, Sal, that's enough. Like, just some of the things that he was saying, because he just gets spinning. He doesn't know what to do with this issue, except for love me, which comes across in the film. So I'm so grateful he was in the movie, and now that it's over and everything's done, we don't really talk about it so much. They're still supportive in the sense that they're proud of me, but they're not proud of the work. But that's okay, and so, but yeah, I'm just grateful that he said yes.
Yeah, we're all grateful he said yes, and we are proud of your work. Super proud. And Rocky, would you change anything in the final edit with the responses that you've received so far of the film? Maybe to include a director's cut. Oh!
I think the movie's pretty perfect. I wouldn't change a thing. And I love everything about it. Like, I've seen the movie way too many times because we had really major technical issues, which is why I was not in the screening last night. I just, although I was missing it because we did a 5.1 mix, which is the surround sound, so you all got to hear the surround sound mix, which I've only seen once in the theater. So I did have a little bit of FOMO last night. But I do think about it. It's like, what would I change or what wouldn't I change? And honestly, I think it's perfect. And I have to, again, give credit to our editor, Jill Woodward, and then our other writer, Jenna Serbu. Like, the three of us really sat down. I knew exactly what kind of story I wanted to tell. I knew exactly the tones that I wanted. I knew what we wanted to shoot, and which was, I never directed a movie in my life, you know, but this was really clear. Right. And then being able to hire well and putting the team together. And our editor didn't grow up in the church. She's not a Christian. Jenna, our producer, is agnostic. And, you know, so we had a team of mixed people who just wanted to put facts in there and really lead with, you know, like you were saying, journalistic integrity. So I couldn't be prouder of it.
It's amazing. It's such an amazing work of art, actually, by all of you. How does the Bible address transgender people? I can't find enough information about eunuchs and what it really means in the context and culture to really understand that God is okay with trans folks.
So the Bible doesn't address a lot of things, and so we can't expect the Bible to be like a recipe book, and then we have to use, you know, a certain portion of sugar and flour, or it's not going to come out right. That's not what it is, and that's not what its intention was. It's not a history book. It never was intended to be a history book. It's got some poetry in there. The prophets have some information in there. There's a lot going on, and so when Rocky's dad asked that question, it's similar to the transgender question that was. Oh, can you put that back up there? Okay, thanks. It's similar to what we're seeing in this question. It's like, if I don't see it in the Bible, it doesn't exist, or it must be sinful, or something like that. And that's ridiculous, because I didn't see very many airplanes in the Bible, or cars, automobiles. You know, I mean, wow, we must be a really sinful people these days, everybody. So that type of, I would say, juvenile way of looking at the Bible is hard to deal with if people can't see beyond that. So one thing I would say is the verse that's used against transgender people is taken out of context. So the verse against transgender people talks about dressing in women's clothes. And so if you look and understand the culture and the history and the context of that verse, men were trying to get out of fighting and war. So if they dressed as a woman and they could avoid that, so they're being cowardice. Malakoi, they're being weak-minded, they're in a coward. They're not fighting for their country and standing up for their country. And so that's what was going on there. And it had nothing to do with, there was not a concept of that. Now, people in the ancient days, were there transgender people around for thousands of years? Yes, absolutely. But there are a lot of people around for a lot of years. But look, we don't want to tell people that we're looking at the Bible for all those things. But guess what? We have enough information in the Bible to teach us how to do it. Err on the side of love. When you don't understand something until you do, why can't you just love someone, right? Until they figured out that the earth is not in the center of the universe, why did they have to put people in prison and kill them and kind of go to that? Wait until we learn a little bit more, right? Err on the side of love in the meantime. And as far as eunuchs are concerned, yes, Matthew 19, Jesus is talking about eunuchs. Oh my goodness. So the whole eunuchs, there's an author.
Boston. No,
there's an author out there named Sandra Turnbull, and she's a pastor at a church in Long Beach. That's the city where I live. And she's written a lot of things on this topic. She's a lesbian pastor, and she has this chapter on eunuchs. And I was just like incredibly amazed. And it looks, I mean, she's got a lot of really good evidence, and she's done a more deep dive into this than anybody I've ever seen. And so it's as if the eunuchs of the day were seen as kind of the LGBT people, and there's a lot going on there. So it's very, very, very interesting. And so she uses like physical evidence and science evidence of information that we have and from historical accounts to kind of look at that. And it's just really incredible. So I would say there's so much to dig into and to understand. And, you know, we have spent most of our time kind of going down this path, and there's so much to do. And so what I like to tell people is, listen, I had one question that was a yearning question, and I just dug in. How many questions haven't even been asked yet? Much less answered. And so I want to invite you guys here, people online, people in the rest of the world, to say, what else is there out there that we can find out and discover and learn to really give more accuracy, not just to this topic, but to more. And I think we can bring a lot more to the table.
Well, and with the Deuteronomy verse as well, you know, it's what defines feminine clothes and masculine clothes. The culture has changed so much, and even around cultures, men wear skirts or dresses, you know, the Celtics, right? And then also high heels were made for men. They were for riding horses, you know, so you can't really look at clothing in that way, and that's where you can, maybe that's your clue that this is being taken out of context. And then I also wanted to mention, last night you mentioned Austin Hartke, right? Was it? No? Oh, they're not here right now, sorry. It was the girl from the Pride center that we met, and last night they mentioned Austin Harkey, who's an author, a transgender author, Christian author, fantastic job on Unix. So definitely read Austin Harkey, and then the verse in Galatians. There's neither male nor female, Jew or Gentile, and what's the other one that they say in there? But anyway, that's just a good, and then the Ethiopian eunuch is another one as well that, could be a representation of the LGBTQ community. So there's so many things in there when you are looking and reading between the lines and looking at other people's interpretations of this. I think there's a lot in there.
Thank you. And for those of you, who are still looking for information, if you have not accessed the FCC resource page, you will actually find a lot of information there on transgender issues as well, especially from the spiritual point of view. So we cover some of these many articles and stuff. So yeah, so go check that out, okay? Can you tell us any more stories about things that didn't make it into the film?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Let me think about it. I mean, David is adorable, right? There was one scene, we were out in Canada, and we filmed him. It was during COVID though, and we tried to film Ed at church in COVID, and it just didn't work. But we filmed a scene with him at his church service, and he used to be in the choir, and he's singing, and he's just a sweet man, So there were just like little
David is
moments
the
like
pastor,
that.
right, in the story. So.
Yeah, he's the man who wrote the letter to the translation committee in 1959. And honestly, like Kathy and Ed's story is incredible. Like they're characters. Like and then we were like, I sent Kathy and Ed's info to our executive producer, Dan Karslake, and he's like, they're great characters. I'm like, yeah. But to know that David is alive and they found him, it's like, this is a story, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some other things that were in the film. Yeah, yes, that's a great scene. You wanna talk about it?
Yeah, so the editor, she worked on the Paris Hilton documentary or something, didn't she? She's amazing. I met her when we were in New York for the Introduction to the World. And so she's just amazing. And she came up to me and said, oh, that whole part about you and that blanket and everything, I wanted to put that in, but the storyline, she was like, I really wanted that. And so the story happened. So Kathy and I do a lot of research. And Kathy came to town one day, so we had a presentation. Kathy and I do this 17-hour presentation over a 2 or 3 day period when churches invite us. We've done that, at times. And so what happened was Kathy came to town, and she's there, and we were going to be giving a talk, and you saw some of the parts of that talk that were in the movie, and I was just having a really hard time. I just was going through a tough time because I had been pretty much outright rejected by my family. I was depressed about that, and I had to get all ready because we were about to do this really huge seminar, and we had huge parts to play in that. And I was like, I got to get it together. It's like, splash water in your face and slap your face and wake up. I've got to get into this. And so about 5 days before that, I just needed to talk to a family member that was affirming. And so I called, my other brother and talked to him, and I thought, oh my goodness, he's definitely not affirming. He's a police officer, and so police officers in America kind of are a different breed. And so I was talking to him about that, and I thought, well, maybe I can start giving these litmus tests to find out where people are. And I said, so, how do you, I'm curious, how do you think a person becomes gay or something? And so he said, well, they choose to be gay. And I was like, wow. I said, well, did you choose to become straight? He's like, yes. I said, when did you make this decision? When I was born. I was like, oh my goodness, okay. And then he got upset with me because he said, that's not how it works, and he's trying to, school me or something. And he said, are you doubting my position and training as a police officer that I don't know about LGBT people? And I said, no, I respect that, but do you realize I've got my master's degree in seminary and I've studied this topic more than most people on the planet, and can you respect that? He's like, oh, okay. So it was just an awkward, and so then I tried talking to my mom, and then I was like, I just needed to hear something where she was inching toward an affirming stance just a little bit. And so I just said, Mom, I'm just curious, why do you think LGBT kids have such a high suicide rate? And I thought she would be like, well, gee, I never thought about that. And that would have been good for her to hear, because she would have been inching a little bit closer. And I thought, maybe if she said, wow, there's probably, I wonder what the reason is. What do you think? And instead she said, well, duh, it's obvious, they're rebelling against God, so they're going to be suicidal. So the pain just got more deep, and I was hurting. And so I called one of the mama bears. And there's this group in America called Mama Bears, and they're 50,000 strong now. They're amazing. And they're like a military of moms, and they come together. And so they're moms of LGBT kids. And they go to pride parades, and they have another subgroup another group they're connected to called Moms Free Mom Hugs. And they'll go and hold up these free mom hug signs at pride parades and pride events. And they'll have people standing in line waiting for a hug and just cry in their arms because they got kicked out of their house. And so it's just amazing to see these groups. And so and that's where I got my affirming mom from, as I called and I talked to one of the mama bears. And we had a great conversation, and she helped me kind of, get propped up a little bit. And then at the time, unbeknownst to me, she started talking with some of the other mama bears. And then cards and emails started flooding my house. Cards just praying for you. I'm a mom. This is my kid, but I'm praying for you. I'm a mom of an LGBT kid, and I love you so much, and you are loved dearly. And I have a stack of cards that came in the mail that these moms sent me that I still have. And then Kathy came to town, and a box came in the mail. But I get boxes in the mail all the time because it's probably an old Bible, right? So this package came in the mail, and I didn't have time to open it because Kathy and I were running around and working on events and getting ready for the talk and all this kind of stuff. And then Kathy was taking a shower in my house, and I thought, okay, I can open up this box, and I expected to see, maybe one of the Bibles that I ordered, and I opened the box, and it was a blanket, a felt blanket. And what they do is they cut these pieces of felt, and they tie them together at the edges, and it was from Mama Bears, and they said, hopefully this blanket can comfort you and keep you warm, and we're praying for you, and we love you. And these mama bears made this. It's a homemade blanket that they sent. And it really hit me. And I held that blanket, and I just dropped to the floor, and I was just holding it and just sobbing. And then Kathy comes out, and she said, Ed, where are you? Hey, Ed, Ed, Ed. She's like going around the house. I couldn't even yell out. I'm in the dining room. I couldn't even say anything. And so she kept walking, and she comes. I couldn't get a breath. And she comes in there, and she sees me on the ground. And she said, what's going on, honey? What's happening? And all I could do is point to the box because there was a card that came with it, and she could see the blanket. And she read it, and she was like, oh, aren't those mama bears just precious? And I couldn't even say anything. I still could not get any words out. And then finally, I was like, I need some time. So I stood up, and I walked across the kitchen, and I could finally get the words out. And I said, my mom and her church ladies make those exact same blankets for homeless people. And here, I felt homeless, and my own mom couldn't even extend that love to me that I was needing so much at the time. But these moms who I've never met made that blanket, and that reminded me of my mom and gave me that blanket. And I value it and I treasure it, but it was just amazing, to me how that happened.
We did shoot that, yeah. Well,
You did
we
shoot
did film
that,
film,
right.
and we were
Yeah.
looking to wrap up all the characters, and it is really sad, and I'm sorry to, it's like we're...
You can't make a 5-hour movie, I get it.
No. I mean, it's more like, I was with my dad, and we at least have some sort of resolution. We did film a little scene with Kathy and her mom, but Kathy and David are the friendship, and Neto, and Ed had no one really. And then your cousins came over, and that was the only family member that you felt you could talk to. And so we were trying to put that, like, this is how much we're alone in this journey. And that's why your scene with intimacy is so important too, because you really hit the nail on the head of like what we go through. We don't, we're not even allowed to be our full selves. How are we gonna be able to connect with people? So, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for sharing all those really beautiful, moving stories. I mean, it just reminds us of the love that surrounds us, even in times that we don't feel it, even in the times when we feel most alone, But it's amazing how God brings people along, just at the right time. Yeah. So what's next in store for the both of you? You've got exciting plans ahead, right? So please. Sure.
Okay. So we're working on our impact campaign. As Pauline mentioned, we are working on getting the movie translated in multiple languages. So it'll be English spoken with subtitles. And right now we have 2 languages done, and if anybody is able to help with that, we would love volunteers in that regard. And I would love everyone in the world to see this movie, honestly. I mean, and definitely every church, every pastor, and so I'm not going to rest. We're going to get the movie out. We did just submit for Amazon Prime, so hopefully it's more searchable all over the world. Although I think it's just US right now. I got to see if we get submitted first, and then we can go to other, yeah. So, and if anybody in another country has a distribution means, we'd love to be on your platform. So maybe we can, send me an email, 1946themovieinfo@gmail.com. And then we're also working to utilize 1946 as a tool in America for civic engagement as we are driving voter registration for the 2024 election. So we're going to go to the Deep South. We have a 35-day tour planned across the United States from California around to Florida and back, working with an ex-evangelical pastor to show the film, talk about the film. But before we show the film, we're going to do a bit of a conference. It's a 4-hour free event for the communities to teach people how the Bible has been politicized and weaponized in countless ways, not just for our community, but specifically in reproductive rights and women's rights. And we were talking about voter, thank you, and desegregation and things like that. And so we just want to afford people permission to rethink these things. And then hopefully we can help sway some persuasion for the election. And again, we can't tell people how to vote. We just want people to vote. And if anybody wanted to help us out with our impact campaign, we're always looking for support. This isn't a cheap thing to make a movie, but then also putting it out. And I do all the day-to-day work, and it's a lot of work. And so if anybody did want to help us with those goals, we do have a GoFundMe as well on our website. You can find everything at 1946themovie.com.
I would say from the theological side, maybe I can dream a little bit here when I look at this question, and hopefully it can be done, but I think it's going to take a village to do it in a couple of these. So the next step we thought would be, as Bible translations in various languages are being done, that they would take another look at this and maybe a deeper dive before they make another mistake. And 2 years ago, I got contacted by some people in Norway. They were working on the new Norwegian version, and they said, we don't want to make this mistake again. So before we do, can we talk with you and kind of get some input on this? And I was like, yes. And so that came like 10 years earlier than I thought it would come, as far as people making reconsiderations in Bible translations. So I think that's exciting, and to kind of see how it's going to have an impact in study materials and books and things like that, and at least people are given the data, and then they can, weigh the data and go from there. But another thing I think that's very interesting, in the course of the research that I've done, one of the things that I discovered that was by 500 AD, remember 500 AD was when St. Jerome translated the Bible into Latin, and then we had the Latin Vulgate for about the next 1,000 years, and it was the only allowed translation out there. And so people didn't speak Latin because it was the language of education. And so people would just have to rely upon the priest to kind of translate it to them and take it from there. But during that 1,000-year period, only the Latin was allowed. And then we know how the Great Reformation came, and it went into other languages and so forth. But up until 500 AD, one of the things I discovered was that the Bible and parts of the Bible had been translated into over 400 languages by the first few centuries after Christ. And so these translations, 500, I was like, wow, has anybody looked into that? No. Has anybody asked, are any of those the clobber passages, and can we see how those were translated? Because one of the things that we learn is, how did other languages look at this when they were translating? Because we can gain a lot of data and insight in this telephone game earlier on, toward the beginning of the telephone game, if we can dive into these. So then I was asking around, well, where are these pieces located? Well, they're located in Melk Abbey, which is in Austria. It's a big, amazing library. The British Museum, the British Library, in the U.S. in Washington, we have the Bible Museum. And then there's the Vatican Museum, and the Vatican Library has a lot of these pieces. And I thought, oh my goodness, there's lots of information there. And maybe one day there's a custodian who's just sweeping the floor, and he says, hey, I learned about what these people are doing, and I think there might be a piece here they might be interested in. And then the whole world is involved in this next level of looking how some of these things have been translated. And so that would rely upon certain people to have specialty in a certain language, an ancient language, and kind of digging in there. So we've got that. And then also there was, in the Middle East, there was this big discovery of an ancient library that had been preserved for about 2,000 years. So lots of ancient Greek relics that are there. And they estimated it's going to take 500 years for all this for us to go through this and decipher it and translate it. And the reason is because when scrolls are that old, 2,000 years old, they kind of melt together. And if you just rip them apart, you're going to destroy it. So it takes a certain scientist who knows how to unroll these scrolls. And then it takes other specialists to do these things, and scientists that are not involved in translation. And then you have the translation team. And a lot of times, materials were so expensive, so they would scrub off one layer and then write down the next layer. And so now we have certain X-ray technology that can look at each layer that they wrote over on various centuries. And so we have access to a lot of information. And so because they said if we start to get the world involved in this, maybe it won't take 500 years to get this project taken care of. It may be more like 25 years as we put things up on the internet and the whole world has access to that and we can get everybody involved. So it's a different world now, and I'm excited about some of those things that can take place and can help us, because if we had a dictionary from the 1st century and we could look up Arsenokoitai and Malakoi, we're done with this conversation. Dictionaries didn't exist until the 1480s. So we are left with looking at ancient documents and comparing pieces here and there to create kind of a put together, reverse engineer a dictionary to kind of find out the meanings of these words and really dig into that. So the pieces are out there, you guys. I really feel the pieces are out there. In the meantime, what if 25 years from now, it's like so easy to see, oops, yes, this was a mistake. Here's what Paul meant. Here's what's going on, and here's how it is. And then the church says, oops, right? In the meantime, can the church err on the side of love until we have ventured through this portion and learned what we need to learn? Just err on the side of love. And when we get there, maybe you won't be so embarrassed like we did in so many other areas of history. Why can't we learn from history? I don't know.
Yeah, and what history has taught us was that the church is usually the last one to kind of get there, right? So that's kind of sad. But the work that you're doing is actually helping, right? It's helping Christians to really start getting into it a little bit faster, a little bit more accurately, and definitely giving hope to people, and I think that's really important. And I thought we could kind of round up this time with the last question maybe, so maybe it's a combined question, right? So one is, what are your secret hopes for this film moving forward? Like, what do you hope for it to be able to do, right, in the world? And the other is, if you had just one thing to say to your audience, and now you know that your audience is not just in Singapore, it's in New Zealand and all over the world, what would you want to say to them?
Wait, what was the question again?
Secret hopes for your movie, and
the goal for it.
yeah,
Well,
what's one thing that you want to say?
I mean, I would like to see equal rights for everyone, and LGBTQ people seen as full participants, not only in society, but in the church, marriage equality, all of those things. And what's going on in America is really scary as far as the pushback on not just our rights, but on women's rights and all of the other things that are going on. So we're in some really trying times right now, and I just hope that people can recognize new information and be brave enough to say, maybe, and for wherever you are, take a step back from your own reality and have enough to be like, maybe I should learn a little bit more. And even for somebody who might not have seen the film, who maybe you're an LGBTQ person and you don't want anything to do with the church. I totally get that, but still just take a step back and come with us on this journey. It's a history piece, it's a political piece, it's a cultural piece, and it really can, I believe, or else I wouldn't have done it and I wouldn't still be doing this work, will shift our culture back towards love and inclusion. Another thing that we've always talked about doing is holding translation committees accountable for the words, the weapons that they're putting out in the world that are killing people. And so that would be the next step for the 1946 team. Maybe next year after we get through the election, we can really start to put pressure on people to hold people accountable for the words they use.
That's great. Thank you. And Ed?
I agree.
I was very serious about that, if you can't tell.
Very. So nothing else that you want to tell anyone? Okay, great. So I just want to thank both Ed and Rocky for being here with us. I mean, not just today, but for the last couple of days, for all that they've poured into in this project, for their love for God and for the world, really, through this. And, to say that you're not alone. We may be a little bit far away, but we're right here with you. We're right here with you. And we're doing the work together. Right? And so will you join me and just give them a really warm round of applause and just to thank them, for all that they've been doing. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. Those of you who stayed back this afternoon, those of you who are joining us online, thank you. And I hope that you have a wonderful day ahead and that we'll continue to do better as we learn more, right? Thank you.